In this lesson, we'll begin preparing our scene for animation. So now it's time to put our controls to good use. The scene is lesson 2 in your project files. What we have is just a simple environment that I've imported, and what we're going to have happen is this ant actually attack this foreign object, this crate. So we're going to have a move predator-like, and we're going to discuss some things that we'll want to use in animation to get an entertaining outcome. So let's go ahead and start. What we can do is go to our animation preferences. We'll go to reset our settings, restore default, and let's go to under settings first. We can make sure that the time is set to 24 frames per second. Underneath that, we'll go to animation, and we're going to switch this to linear and stepped for default in and default out, so we can block out the animation. I like to use this method and basically just get a general idea of where we'd like to go with the animation, and once we're satisfied, we can then start to smooth out our settings by switching our preferences. Alright, so now let's go to the timeline. We can set this to real time 24 frames per second, and we should be good to go. We can hit save. Now what I also like to do when switching between blocked and a smooth interpolation is to use the script editor to find where we have basically set the settings to block out the animation. So here it is, key tangent global dash ITT in tangency, and there's the linear and there's the stepped. So what we could basically do is copy this. I'll go ahead and select the first line, copy. In the script editor, we'll go a few more lines down. This is going to be for global tangency. Okay, we can start with the default in. Set this to, this would be linear. Okay, and we'll just paste that line in. We'll copy the next. That's going to be the, put a few comments, that's going to be the default out, which is stepped, and we'll paste the line. Next we'll make a few lines for our smoothed out animation, so we'll use plateau. So we'll say default in plateau. Make sure we spell it right. And then we'll basically go ahead and copy this default in, which is set to linear right now, and we'll paste and switch linear to plateau. We can copy this line. I'll just copy this. We'll paste it underneath, and then we'll basically call this default out set to plateau, and we'll just switch the I to an O. Alright, so now we have some information we can use to quickly switch our default in and out tangency. So if I were to just expand this, the script editor, what we'll do is take our default in and out that's set to linear and stepped. We can now middle mouse button click, drag that to our shelf. In the shelf editor, we can rename it. So that's this last line. We can call this BLC for block. Okay, and then can close this out. Go to the next few lines. Bring this to our shelf. And go to the script editor again. Name this SMT for smooth. So watch, if we were to go to our preferences after choosing smooth, you'll see that our animation settings are now set to plateau. If we were to select block, go back, you'll see that they're set to linear in steps. So it's just a quick way to quickly switch between. Now you'll notice if we switch to smooth, you won't see it update until you close it and reopen. Okay, but we'll switch it back to block, and we're now ready to basically set our timeline. We'll set it to about 200. We'll also set our initial key, so we'll go to our main character set, and on frame 1 we could press the S key to set a key on all of our keys, all of our attributes. We'll keep the character set on because we're basically going to block out the animation, so we'll keep them on each on the same frame, and then when we're ready to add offsets we will. Now typically I use storyboards for animation, but this time we're going to take a more straight ahead approach. We're going to kind of come up with it as we go, with a general idea of what we'd like to achieve. So again, he's going to be more predator-like. Okay, and he sees this foreign object, he doesn't know what it is, so let's go ahead and have him get right into his purpose, if you will. What we'll do is start the animation on frame 10. Okay, so we can, if we want to, we can always go back to our default pose on frame 1. And then on frame 10, we'll also press the S key. Okay, to set a key. And then we'll even use auto key to speed up our keying process. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And we'll begin posing out our insect so that he's face towards this cube, but in a predator-like manner, so maybe tilting his head. We'll want to go ahead and set his mesh layer to reference, so we could just easily select these controls and bring these up. And if you accidentally select any locators or anything like that, it'd be a good idea to just go through and hide certain things we don't want to see. So for the locators, we can go ahead and uncheck those. And then we can hit the wireframe just to make sure that everything's good. And it should be. Alright, so we'll want to get some nice strong silhouettes. We'll bring up his tail. We'll curve out the sting. We'll want to also have his legs spread out too, in that back. And we can go ahead and work on rotating out his claws. And what we'll actually do is basically focus on the claws as a secondary layer. Okay, we'll work on just the main upper body and the legs as our first layer, and then go in and just add what we need to put the icing on the cake. So bring the legs out. We want to also make sure we keep in animation principles and the different physics that would be involved as far as making sure that he'd be balanced. For our move tool, let's go ahead and switch that to local so we can basically have a cleaner keying process. And then for the rotate tool, we can switch that to local as well. Okay, so let's see. We can get the upper body a little bit more involved. I have the back currently set to the thorax, or the front thorax control driven by the back. But let's see, with this upper body or center of gravity control, being that it controls the entire upper body, and based off of what we're trying to achieve, what we'll do is set the follow to world. Okay, so have this first pose blocked in. We can make him a little bit lowered so he looks almost ready to pounce. I'll just fix his head a little bit more. Okay, so we have our first pose blocked in. What we'll do is stop the lesson and continue just blocking in our main poses in the next lesson.